Environment Editor Valérie Dekimpe joins me now on the set to break this New Deal down. First of all, Valerie, what exactly is in the agreement?
Well, as you were saying, for the first time in 30 years of history of UN climate summits, we have a final text and decision that explicitly mentions fossil fuels. And at the beginning of the conference, there was a lot of momentum on potentially a fossil fuel phase out. That means ending the use of fossil fuels. That was eventually dropped from the text, a major disappointment for a lot of people. But in this final text, crucial language on fossil fuels was nonetheless strengthened. And this is what we have now, calling on nations to transition away from fossil fuels in a just, orderly, and equitable manner, accelerating action in this critical decade to achieve net zero emissions by 2050. A lot of things to unpack there in that crucial paragraph of the text, because in the last version that we had of the draft, it mentioned reducing production and the consumption of fossil fuels. But again, no phase out, no phase down. What we have now is still more ambitious than actually just reducing production and consumption, because you have this idea of moving away, of leaving an old system behind and potentially ushering a new era of cleaner energy. So you have that shift there. The fact that it also says just and equitable manner is a nod to developing nations, which had been demanding different pathways for different countries. The fact that developed nations responsible for the vast majority of emissions and the climate crisis move away from fossil fuels before the rest of the world. Again, it is a bit more of a vague call because it doesn't give you a timeline, but you have that in that statement, and also accelerating efforts this decade. So it gives us a sense of urgency and, of course, net zero by 2050. So that's for fossil fuels. You also mentioned renewable energy and other objectives. Part of a key energy package also included in the final text: tripling renewable energy by 2030, doubling energy efficiency by 2050. And what's important here is that, again, the language was strengthened overnight, because before we had just that list of things that governments could do with the wording that nations could do, and now we have that it calls on nations to actually do that. It is a slight difference, but it is essentially the fine print of that is what takes us from a deal that was unacceptable for countries yesterday to a deal that was approved by countries.
200 countries are approving that deal. Have there been reactions so far coming in?
A lot of reactions, as countries are still, addressing the plenary floor and kind of giving their reactions to this deal and their final remarks. We heard from UN climate chief Simon Steele saying this was the beginning of the end for fossil fuels. A similar reaction from Ursula von der Leyen, the president of the European Commission, also with that notion of the beginning of the end for the fossil fuel era. A reaction from French environment minister, who said it was a victory for multilateralism and climate diplomacy. Vulnerable nations, AOSIS, they issued a statement saying that the final text was an improvement from what we had, but they do see, quote, a litany of loopholes. And so we are getting also mixed reactions from NGOs, because they are stating the fact that this is an important moment, historic, and the fact that it's mentioning fossil fuels for the first time. But those loopholes, the fact that carbon capture storage technology is in the text, essentially saying countries could capture emissions and store them underground and potentially keep using fossil fuels. And also the fact that there is no clear plan and financial means in order to help developing nations move away from fossil fuels.